Welcome to The Spot. Today I was joined by Robert Mcgregor from Cirrus Capital. He's the head of research. We spoke a little bit about the energy sector in Namibia, and more specifically we spoke about our new oil discovery. Is that a blessing, is it a curse? We spoke about green hydrogen, and we topped it off with a little defense of his investment ethos. I hope you enjoy. Cheers. Yeah. Okay, sweet. So Robert, how are you today, my friend?
I'm well, and yourself?
Good, good. Welcome to The Spot, man. We've been out of action for a couple of years, but we're back now. You're going to be the first episode back, and we're going to get you cancelled.
It's not a very promising start.
Right, cool, man. So I personally respect your view on just basically financial markets, but more specifically, I think you have a lot of insights in the current situation in Namibia pertaining to the oil find, right? So I think a good disclaimer is that most of this is going to be speculation.
Hopefully, well, all of it is really speculation, not most.
Right.
But
So my message to you is don't hold back.
yeah.
You know, speculate as much as you like. Be as creative as you like. I think it's more than information. It's also not informative, but also it's supposed to be a bit funny and entertaining, because nobody's gonna watch serious shit all the time, right? Cool. So I don't know if I can go here, but we could probably edit it out if I can't. But do you want to have a chat about the green hydrogen project as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Because I like it.
we
Look, I know that you're not fully on board, and I understand why. We have 3 different projects in Namibia currently, just for some background. But I just like to play devil's advocate or not. So currently, one thing I came across this week when I did a little bit of research is Namibia's electricity price per kilowatt hour is probably one of the lowest in the world, right?
It's one of the highest in the region.
Compared to South Africa?
Compared to the entire Southern Africa.
Yeah, but compared to what you can pay per kilowatt hour for the green hydrogen electricity, it's like half the price.
For renewables, it's really cheap here, right? Between wind and solar, it's incredibly cheap. So NamPower is looking to do a lot more renewables because that helps bring down the average cost for consumers.
So in your view, do you think the average price of electricity should be going up if we continue with the status quo?
Well, I mean, at this stage,
to what extent?
We're importing from most of our electricity from Eskom. I mean, our large reliance is on Rokana, which is run of river, and obviously, if it's not raining enough up north, Rokana doesn't perform as needed. Yeah. And then we need to import from our neighbors, and most of those contracts are in US dollars as well then.
Right.
Which puts us a lot of risk. But I mean, our largest reliance is on Eskom, and I mean, we've seen Eskom is trying to push through between 9 and 20% tariff hikes a year for South Africa.
Yeah, so that's going to filter through to us. But these contracts are they not signed 3 years ahead?
Well, they normally run under 5-year periods. So we've got a PPA, power purchase agreement with Eskom. That was signed March 2017, so it expires March 2017 for April 2017, so it expires end of this month actually. Right. End of March this year. Right. And then, I mean, I assume they've negotiated or are negotiating an extension. But I mean, obviously, like pricing, we get firm power, so they guarantee us a certain amount of electricity that we get, and then we can also, within the agreement, there's normally an option to access electricity on the day-ahead market. But that obviously, like the pricing can vary there. Right.
So, would you think then it's better to continue the status quo, or do you think a project like our little green hydrogen project, which is very expensive, let's just say hypothetically, because I do know they're trying to export some of the stuff, the raw powder, right? Which I wouldn't agree with, but let's just say the concept of green hydrogen. But I think let's take a back step. Would you be able to describe that process to me?
Look, like green hydrogen, I don't think is a bad idea. Right? It's definitely, I think, a step in the right direction. I mean, the entire idea behind green hydrogen in Namibia, so it's producing, you get different kinds of hydrogen, right? You get your green, blue, gray, brown. I think you've even got a purple one.
Yeah, that's basically hydrogen that's created or
through different methods,
and it's not a renewable. You could basically use coal or whatever to.
Well, yeah. So like for instance, your blue hydrogen basically uses fossil fuels or something similar to create hydrogen, because obviously hydrogen in the form that we need it doesn't exist very easily or abundantly on Earth.
I think it doesn't. It's always paired with something like water.
So blue hydrogen, for instance, is where you use carbon capture to offset your carbon emissions. So the idea behind green hydrogen is that you have no carbon emissions from production, right? You basically get water, you run a lot of electricity through it, which then separates your hydrogen, your H2, and your oxygen.
Right.
And then from there, you've got your green hydrogen. So the idea is to use wind and water energy, which is green, to
Renewable.
produce hydrogen.
Right.
And I mean, Namibia does have that potential, but I do think there are some challenges. For instance, the timeline is still quite long. I think that's definitely a question. And I mean, the area they're wanting to do it in is in Lüderitz, right? And I mean, Lüderitz has some of the best wind energy potential in the world. There's no doubt. I mean, people like to say in Lüderitz the wind blows for 360 days a year, right? Like, I don't know if you've been there, but it's not fun.
I haven't.
It's really not pleasant.
What did you do there, though, by the way?
I mean, I grew up close by in Oranienburg.
So that was like your holiday destination?
I wouldn't call it a holiday, but we went there a couple of times, yeah. And saw places like Holmanskop and similar.
Okay.
We almost moved to Oranienburg, to Lüderitz. When my dad worked for Namdeb, or he got a job with Namdeb, and they offered him some houses in Lüderitz, and my mom said no. We went down to Lüderitz to check it out. I was like 4 years old, and my mom straight up said, "We're not moving here."
Crazy.
So I mean, Lüderitz has the wind potential, right? But the challenge now is Nampower has been eyeing Lüderitz for wind for years already. They've been trying to get wind from their stakeholder, or from their shareholder, which is government, for years. Mm-hmm. And now, you've got this green hydrogen that's come along, and suddenly they've been allocated a lot of the land. So, the question there then is not that they need to compete, right? They can share the land, they can they can work around it, but it's just funny to see that, Nampower, the national power utility, has been struggling for years to get access to land, and one project comes along and suddenly it's allocated a lot of the prime land.
Yeah, it is prioritized. But you know what? I'm just sitting here thinking, just per kilowatt hour, right? And if you just look at the pricing of what you'd get out of your green hydrogen, what we're getting now, right? It's still so much more expensive. But am I wrong in assuming? And look, I don't know anything about this. I'm not a technical expert in it. I like to just do my books and do my analysis on a company, and that's that. The numbers never lie. But this is a bit different. So I just wanted your opinion in terms of the price you pay per kilowatt hour from a green hydrogen project. Very similar to the one that we're planning to set up in Namibia. Is that price consistent over 15 years, or would you have some price benefit of it coming down as I don't know, I guess it grows? Because I'm assuming the maintenance is very low. If you're putting on solar panels, you have to clean them.
I mean, there it becomes a very, it depends on what you go around doing. That's an economist's favorite answer, it depends.
Compared to what? And depends.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that you would expect the cost to come down, especially, as your technology improves. I think the one issue potentially is in that part of the world, obviously your wear and tear is probably going to be a bit higher than a lot of other places, right? The desert, the corrosion from the salt in the air, the sand, the wind, the heat. So with time, probably yes. But, you can produce it for cheap here. All right, sure. Let's say you can produce it for cheaper here than you can in most other places. I mean, look, you then have to start asking, is the cost of capital cheaper here than elsewhere?
Yeah.
So are your financing costs here more affordable than elsewhere? That's another question. Mm-hmm. But I think, all right, let's assume that it is cheaper here. The question is, what are you going to do with all of it once it's produced? Because you're not going to use it that easily here. And not the quantity that they're looking to produce. Yeah,
but the biggest producer, South Africa right now, I would say South Africa is the biggest producer of electricity in SADC. Is that a good assumption to make?
Yeah, well, look, we're producing green hydrogen, right?
Yeah.
Not electricity. So the electricity for green hydrogen literally just goes towards the green hydrogen project. Maybe they'll feed back into the grid. I don't know. They might have an agreement with Nampower where they've got excess or not. But again, the challenge is Nampower is already looking to do their own solar and wind. And so the risk you sit with is that you've got a lot of energy being produced at the same time, right? Because wind and solar they're not baseload, they're intermittent.
Right. Then just to play devil's advocate, are we not linked to the South African grid? Because how are we getting electricity?
Yeah, so I mean, the entire region is interconnected. Yes. It's the Southern African power.
So would you change your stance on green hydrogen if we were selling not green hydrogen but electricity through green hydrogen?
Well, then you need you need a power plant that can run on green hydrogen.
Yeah.
Which is not, it's not out of the question.
Yeah.
Possibly, but that's not something that we're looking at doing, right? Then we're
looking to export the
most likely.
green hydrogen.
There is. I know there was talk of looking to use a lot of it locally. I don't see quite where. You can convert the green hydrogen into ammonia.
Yeah.
and you can run combustion engines on ammonia. But I mean, I don't see that being the case here very quickly, very easily, especially for a I mean, we're technically an upper middle income country, but let's be honest, that's not the reality on the ground, right?
Yeah, because of the inequality, right?
Yeah, so I mean, you're not going to see people in the north or the south, the far north or far south, converting their cars to something that can very easily run on
ammonia.
It
doesn't make any sense, right?
So look, like there is potential in. I think green energy has a lot of potential. That definitely. I mean, Namibia can very easily pivot to that, and we can move that. I mean, we can make that something that makes Namibia stand apart. Green hydrogen can be part of that, sure.
Yes.
But I think the attention shouldn't be on green hydrogen then. The attention should be on, all right, let's make Namibia the environment where you can come for green energy, right?
Right. But I mean, look, if you just look at it as an investor, let's just say, assume you're an international investor. If you see the government supporting a big project like green hydrogen, you see the government punting it. Let's just say hypothetically we get tax breaks on it, which probably wouldn't happen. But let's just say it seems like the environment is very conducive for green energy. We're basically pivoting in that direction. We're trying to be, self-sustainable and also become independent of South Africa, which I think is a good thing. If you just to go off on a tangent, we're basically in the shadow of an empire, the same way Ukraine was in Russia's empire. Shadow, right? But the issue is South Africa's military is pretty much useless for now. But I don't think it's good for a country to be dependent on another country to that extent.
I mean,
right?
Yes
that's
and
a
no,
tangent
right?
we can go to afterwards.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your opinion, but I just want to quickly ask the question on if you see the government very much in favor of green energy. As an international investor or innovator, would that not incentivize you to think, hey, I might look at Namibia as the next destination too?
I mean, it would, right? There's a lot of government support behind it. There's a lot of backing behind it. That's great. But at the same time, we've got a lot of unresolved issues. Dividend tax, NEPA, NEF, all these things. I mean, they're still hanging like an axe over everyone's head.
Yes.
5, 6, 7, 8 years later?
Yes. No, I agree with that.
So, I mean, it's a good starting point, but we've still got a lot to fix before that. And I think these things are good, but at the same time, our problems are a lot bigger, much bigger than a single thing like this can solve, right? Yeah. And so, push for projects, right? But my view as an economist is not government should be pushing specific things, right?
Free market, right?
Yeah, so create the environment that it's easier for everyone to do businesses, right? So, I mean, when you start doing things when you start introducing policies that say, all right, well, you know what, let's incentivize this. I mean, policies come down to incentives and disincentives. At least that's what they should be. I don't think that's what we do here, to be honest. Yeah. Here it seems a bit more sort of, let's just wing it and see what the pushback is. But I think the general thing is, you're never going to know the perfect answer, right? You're never going to know this sector is what we need to focus on because this is going to be the solution. You can think it might be, but it might not turn out that way. And, despite like having all the best Namibians in the same place, you might never find out, you might never get to that one idea. Rather let people, I mean, I think what we forget is a lot of people there's a lot of drive within people to make their own lives better, right? To ensure that their tomorrow is better than their today. But at this point in time, I mean, we make it difficult for people to realize that for themselves. Right. I don't know if you've had to deal with things like BEPA, Inland Revenue,
yeah, of course,
Ministry of Trade, City of Windhoek, in the last few years. I mean, we wanted, we dealt with an organ of state, let's call it that, to get data, and they said it's fine. We can, we need to pay for it, and I was like, I don't mind paying for it, if depending on the price, but we'll deal with that when we get to that. But to get it, you had to go down to their offices, go stand at a specific counter, go fill in physical application forms, hand it in, and then wait for a response in the 21st century.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like, you should be able to do that from your phone in your office.
And we have a fourth industrial revolution task force. So maybe you guys should flag that as an issue.
So I mean, like green hydrogen is great, right? But but we need to focus, I think, on making things in general easier, right?
Okay, let's make you president for the next 5 years. I wanted to say for a day, but that's not enough time. So what exactly would you put in place that would change?
I mean,
and also speak a bit about your philosophy, because I do sense you're probably like an economist. Do you identify as an economist?
Unfortunately.
Yes, okay. So I think you're more towards like the Chicago school.
But Austrian
Hayek,
sort of.
Those are your guys, yeah? So you like Hayek, you like Milton Friedman.
Yeah.
Right, so like you're president for 5 years, talk about it, but that's cool. But also, Speak a bit about your philosophy and where it actually comes from. I think that'll be quite interesting.
I mean, like the challenge, right, is that it's not just president, right? So I mean, with our political system, you've got the president is sort of he's the head of the executive. He basically, does the execution, right? The doer gets the right people in place and does that. I mean, a lot of it needs to come from the political parties and what they drive through Parliament, the legislature, right? That's where a lot of the policy and stuff comes from. Within government or within the executive, so within the ministries, there's room for policy and stuff. And I think that's where, I mean, if you look at Namibia historically, it's quite weird, right? Our government's never been as left-leaning as South Africa's. And I think it's very much down to the history of the different parties, right? In Namibia, SWAPO was and a lot of political parties in Namibia were joined not by ideology, but by wanting to have Namibia free and independent.
So everybody had a common goal.
And that was the common thread, right? In South Africa, it was similar, but it was underscored through Marxist-Leninist theory for the most part, right? And I mean, we had the backing from a lot of the same countries: Cuba, Russia, China, North Korea. But if you look at the ideology within the party, in Namibia, it's been a lot more balanced than in South Africa, and I think that was beneficial, and we saw that for the first 25 years. I think what we've seen in the last couple of years is obviously like there's been a big leftward shift in policy because people don't feel like things are moving quickly enough or changing fast enough.
Right.
And obviously, I just in my view, I disagree with that. As a student, I was very sort of left-leaning.
Yeah, until you get paid.
and then you start working, and then you realize, like it's different in the real world. Like sitting in the ivory tower is one thing, but like actually working, making decisions, being responsible for people and their salaries and their lives and all that sort of stuff. You start
paying
realizing.
Taxes.
And seeing what your tax money gets spent on.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean that's what influenced a lot of my philosophy, I'd say. A lot of the reading I do. I mean, I'm studying part-time now, and a lot of the reading I do, I'm like reading the textbooks. I'm like, well, this is like factually incorrect, right? It's wrong.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of sort of whitewashing and changing of things. I mean, in one of my textbooks, it's a law textbook. They literally changed the definition of capitalism.
To what?
Like, effectively, that capitalism was the means by which European countries, or it was what drove European countries to colonize Africa. And it's like, well, I mean, those were monarchies. Wouldn't call them very free market.
Yeah, you're right.
So, like I can also go around and change definitions to make things seem what I want them to. But
that's so interesting. What's the textbook? Do you want to reference it so that they can fix it?
I can't remember. It's on customary law.
How would you define capitalism, though? I think that's a good question. It's philosophical.
I mean, look. It's. I think it's the means. Effectively, sort of liberalism, right? Freedom is the closest. I mean, it doesn't mean I'm not talking about unbridled sort of like free market, right? I think there do need to be some. I mean, we see it in a lot of other ways we live life where we agree by common means. This is the things we go by, like like murder, right? We all agree murder is bad, shouldn't be done. But I do think we've drifted very much in the wrong direction where we see too much centralization in government, and I mean, government's role has grown. I mean, government is competing with private sector in a whole lot of industries, which is just really bizarre.
Yeah.
Government focusing on core functions, great. Not meddling too much in the everyday lives of individuals and people. Let people go about doing their own thing. There's this idea of like self-interest, and when we talk about self-interest as though it's bad, right? But I mean, sort of self-interest is what's driven a lot of the progress we've seen in history.
I agree.
I mean, self-interest is why I go to work in the morning trying to do a good job, earning a decent salary.
Exactly. It's why you're sacrificing,
And I mean, and that's where, we come up with new ideas, new ways of thinking things, new solutions to problems that we see. It's in our interest to do it.
Yeah. And I think it's also very much ingrained in, this is something I learned in Ecos 101, the 4 factors of production. So it's land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, or business enterprise, whatever you want to call it. And I think one interesting aspect that I came across was that when I realized these things are all interchangeable. So in terms of economic theory, they should be equal. So somebody who has money can start a business, is taking a risk, he should be rewarded for that. Somebody who works should be rewarded, whether that's in terms of you giving me capital or land, anything that can produce. So I think it's important to note that it's like people aren't working for free. They're working for capital, they're working for land, they're working for entrepreneurship, which are assets at the end of the day. So I think, just to sum it up, you think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just inferring. So a good solution for Namibia would then be to have a more free market. So I'd assume that's make it easier for people to start businesses here, make it easier for businesses to thrive, so lower taxes, encourage more freedom, and then at the end of the day, everything's going to self-correct because everybody's pursuing self-interest.
To an extent, look, it doesn't happen overnight, right?
Yes.
That's the first thing, is everyone wants a quick fix, and frankly, that's not going to happen. I mean, we've got hundreds of years of issues that need to be resolved, and you're not going to resolve that overnight.
Yeah.
But I do think, with time it does improve. I mean, I've got friends here who studied at UNAM and NUST. They can't find a job. So they have some ideas. They try and start their own businesses, and I mean, it's there's roadblocks everywhere. Trying to register a business takes time. I mean, you submit forms to BIPA. It's not signed, like it's signed too many centimeters in the wrong place, or your certified copies were certified by a commission of oaths, not by the police. Reject, start again. Silly things like this that we just make it difficult. I mean, especially for people wanting to resolve their own problems. I mean, entrepreneurs are the risk takers, right? They're big risk, big reward. But I mean, those are the people that build businesses, that build society, and I mean, we make it difficult for those people to even just get off the ground.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think we often underestimate people's ability or desire to improve their own lives, and I think if we can get out of the way to let people do that. Obviously, there's the idea of like not in a way that harms everyone else, right? Your rights extend as far as your body does.
Right.
As soon as you start harming other people, directly, indirectly, then obviously that needs to be resolved.
Right.
But I mean.
Yeah. So speaking of freedom, I think it's a very good segue, because there's this running joke: whenever you find oil, America's going to bring freedom to you. So, what's your take? Firstly, give us a little, because I think you're very close to it. Not close to it, but I think you're interested in it, and it's pretty evident. So, would you just like to give us a little roundup of what exactly has happened with Namibia and this oil find? Because I do know in 2014 or 2013 we had an oil find as well. So what's different this time? I guess that's the question.
I think, okay, so I mean, as background, Shell and Total have drilled offshore very far in the south of Namibia. So basically in deep offshore blocks bordering South Africa effectively. And they've found oil, right? It's official. We all know that they've hit oil, which is great. And it's light oil from the looks of it, which is good because light oil gets you more money than heavy oil does. Right? It's when you basically start refining it, you can get more output out of light oil than you can heavy oil effectively, which is why it's more valued.
Okay.
So that's very positive. And I mean, for us, that's very exciting because we had talks of finding oil previously, but I don't actually think there was oil. I mean, Namibia's drilled something like 21 dry wells before this.
Yeah.
I think, what is it, Norway that drilled more than 30 before they hit oil there?
Yeah, I have no idea.
In the 60s or 70s. So I mean, it's really positive, right? There's a find, and that's big news as it is. I think the potential for oil, obviously, I mean, our economy is really small, right? It's not even okay. Let's call it about 10 billion US, just over 10 billion US. If you start talking about hundreds of millions of barrels of oil, and let's not even use today's prices. Let's use prices
from normalized prices, yeah.
From a couple of months ago, something more believable. Then you're still looking at easily the equivalent of Namibia's GDP, assuming you've got that much oil, right? I think the first thing is that what's really positive is that these are two majors, right? They're well-established companies. They've got, as far as oil companies go, they've got good reputations. So, when they say they've got oil, I think, we can believe them, we can trust them. And I mean, NAMCOR and government have confirmed at least, or have at least released the press statement saying that there's oil. So that's very positive. What this means now is, obviously there's a lot of questions on, is it commercial or not? That's the big if. That's the sort of the 50-50. It either is or it isn't. And if it isn't, I think things are still positive because there's been oil discovered. It's going to drive more exploration activity. And a lot of, exploration happens offshore. I mean, there is onshore exploration, but I don't think it's very likely. But the offshore stuff, it happens for offshore, but it still does generate revenue for government and for the country. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, to drill offshore, you're spending hundreds of millions of US dollars alone, and government does get something out of it. There's services withholding taxes. There's consumption from within Namibia. They bring in expats where they need the skills. Those expats spend foreign currency here as well, and they spend a lot more than most people would. So there are benefits to it, and it does put Namibia sort of on the map and say, all right, well, there's potential here, which is great. And so I think that's definitely something to sort of look forward to. I mean, government gets a lot of taxes from it. I mean, there's services withholding taxes, right? So I mean, if these majors now hire drill rigs, they hiring the service, they pay tax on that. So for the fee that they pay, or that they rent effectively the drill rig for, government gets like 10% of that or something.
Yeah,
similar, right?
It's robust.
So I mean, for no work, government's actually getting, and it's big risk, right? Because if you drill, you might find something, you might not.
Yeah.
And for a long time, we haven't found anything. If we do find oil, then it's all right. Is it commercial? All right. Let's speculate and say it is. Then it's very much down to a lot of technicalities. How much oil is there? Firstly, is it a lot? Is it very, very little bit? If it's very little bit, likely not commercial, especially because this is very far offshore, so it's off the coast, but it's also very deep underwater. And so, you need something very sizable for that to then start making commercial sense. But then it comes down to a lot of stuff, like how is the oil trapped, for instance? So is it, if you think of it as say a lake almost, right? Is it one big lake, or is it lots of small lakes with things in between that's stopping you from getting to the others? If it's the latter, then it's obviously a lot more expensive to get it out, and then is it worth it? Is it I guess what impacts the value as well is it a sweet or sour oil? So basically how much sulfur content is there as well. Other things like the pressure as well. So I mean, is there a lot of pressure or not? If there's a lot of pressure, then you need high-end equipment to extract, which also makes it more expensive, and then your capital costs might become prohibitive. So there's a lot of things that are impacting, to what extent it might be commercial.
Right.
But let's just say it is. I mean, then Namibia's future changes dramatically.
Wakanda.
Well, I mean, it depends if we spend the money right.
Interesting. So there's one thing that just popped in my head. I've been reading a lot of commentary on this oil find, and it seems like there's a select group of people who believe that even though we found this oil, it's already been hijacked by international corporations. I don't think this is the case. And the proxy I use is even, diamonds. It's like we're part of the government actually owns diamonds in Namibia. They own a part of...
they own Namibia, 50-50,
exactly.
Right?
And they get taxes on top of that. So it's like you guys are basically eating into most of that revenue. So it definitely should impact Namibia in my mind, if I just draw that parallel. But do you understand how, or can you explain to me why somebody would believe that even if it is a big commercial, like you said, light oil, and it's one big lake and not many different lakes, why would that not benefit Namibia significantly? Just to think of the other side of the coin before we go to the benefits.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of money from these things, but a lot of people don't see that money, and that's why we tend to think that, right? Because the money goes towards government as a representative of the people, and then how government spends that money tends to be the issue, right? They spend it on a bunch of fancy new headquarters instead of making sure people have access to a school with classrooms and desks,
yes,
a hospital that works, they've got running water and electricity at home. And then people will say, well, obviously we don't see benefit from these things.
Yeah. Okay, I see. So they're already predicting that the government's going to squander whatever comes in.
And there's also this view that I mean, like our resources are being taken away, and I mean, at a very shallow level they are. But you've got two options, right? So I mean, same with our mineral, with all of our minerals, whether it's now something like oil, if it's diamonds or gold. You've got two options. You can leave it there and we don't get anything from it, or we get it out, right? And we get a benefit from it. Especially, I mean, you want to get it out when it's profitable to do so you can get taxes and so on from it, right? If you want to take it out, you need someone who can do that. I mean, we don't have the skills or the finances within this country to do that. The oil regime, as it stands, the tax regime is actually it's actually surprisingly progressive for a country.
Right.
Especially for.
Can you explain that? Because I have some viewers who aren't like.
Yeah. So I mean, if we think the tax system in Namibia is not very progressive, right? In general, I mean, we've got technically progressive income tax brackets.
So you mean that people who have more money get taxed more?
Yeah. And it's forward thinking, right? So I mean, So with personal income tax brackets, it is progressive, right? People who earn more pay more tax, and that's an argument I can understand, especially given our history. I don't think that's wrong. I mean, I think they do need to be changed. I mean, the tax brackets haven't changed in 8-9 years, and obviously the inflationary impact of money on poorer people means that they've got materially less spending power now.
Can you break that down and simplify it?
So basically, what the bottom bracket is 50,000.
Yep.
If you adjust that for inflation, it should be at around over 70,000 NAM dollars by now. So basically, if you're earning less than about 70,000 NAM dollars or less, you shouldn't actually be paying tax, right?
Right.
So now inflation. Say you've been earning a very basic wage. What is it? It's 4,167 more or less per month, right? Yeah. You're paying tax, or you are liable for tax. Say your salary gets increased. I thought maybe $1,000 a month. Let's be generous, or let's say $1,000 a year, right? You are paying more and more tax as the years go by, but with inflation, obviously your money is worth less and less as well.
Yeah.
And government hasn't made that adjustment, so you're losing out at the end of the day.
Yeah.
For high income people, it's not as big of an issue, right? It doesn't. You mean you get irritated because you're paying more tax and you're not getting anything for it, but it's incredibly regressive for poorer people who already are strapped for income, likely have I mean, you see this in, not that we've got recent statistics, but you see this across the globe. The more money you have, the smaller your family tends to be, right?
Yep.
And so obviously now low income people are subjected to taxes when I feel they shouldn't be. The impact of inflation, and especially, I mean, you tend to see high inflation on the stuff that they consume the most, right? Food and transport.
Yeah.
And then they tend to have a much larger line of dependence. And so, I mean, it makes life really tough for the sort of, I mean, let's be honest, like the more average Namibian.
Yeah, facts.
The more average, but the average Namibian. So the tax regime is actually surprisingly forward-thinking for oil. So there's a corporate tax rate of 35%, which is surprisingly low. I mean, normal corporates pay 32%. If you mine diamonds, you're paying 55%. If you mine anything other than diamonds, you're paying 37.5%.
Okay.
So oil companies will pay 35% on their profits, right? But I mean, you don't make profits for your first couple of years.
Yeah. Okay.
But before that, you'll get taxed. So you get taxed to 5% royalty, so 5% on the value of your revenue, right? So that's to say, all right, well, you're pulling out this resource, irrespective of whether you're making a profit or not, you're paying a 5% royalty, so top line tax on the value of what you sell. So 5% on the value of this oil, and that's, I mean, that's good. So that that way you aren't trying to if companies do try and push down their profits, it's not reducing the tax they pay too much.
Right.
But then there's also an additional profit tax for oil companies specifically. So it's called the additional profit tax, or APT. And it basically says that the more profit you make, the more tax you pay, which is actually a really good way to look at it, right? So when, let's say, for instance, you're producing oil at $40 a barrel. It's at the market price is $60 a barrel. You're making $20 of profit. Right, as a very basic example. You're paying a fixed amount of tax. Now the oil price jumps to 120.
Okay, that makes sense.
Suddenly you're paying a lot more tax because of the way the additional profit tax works.
Okay.
Which is actually a very good way to do it. So where there are supernormal profits being made, the oil companies are paying more tax, which is actually, I mean, I think it's a really good way to go about natural resource taxation in general.
Oh, that makes sense. And that's actually implemented in Namibia.
Well, I mean, it's never been implemented before because we don't produce oil. But that's how the legislation stands at this time.
Okay, excellent.
And it's actually, I mean, I think it's a really good way to look at tax, and that's a good way to go about it. And I mean, if I look at the rest of our tax system, I'm surprised that we've got something so forward thinking in there.
Yeah. I wonder if it's intentional or if it's a mistake. But in any case, we will benefit. And then the next one I wanted to ask you, just in terms of environmental degradation, what do you think the impacts could be? Because I'm just drawing a parallel because I'm untrained in the field, as I said before. So what I do is I just draw parallels to what I've seen outside, and I like recalibrate and infer. So Nigeria, right? They were like a very big agricultural producer before they struck oil. And then that industry literally died. So whoever was a farmer, whoever was, I don't even understand how exactly they were farmers and how the agricultural system worked, but I knew it was one of their biggest contributors to employment and value add, right? And then they discovered oil and that industry died completely. Do you think finding oil in Namibia could be a curse rather than a blessing?
I mean, it depends on how it's handled, but yes, I mean, it's the typical resource curse, where you've got a lot of riches, but a lot of it gets exported and very little gets seen in country, right? And
so, yeah, but look, just in terms of employment, right? Should this not employ more people on a very basic level?
No, I mean, mining tends to be capital intensive more than labor intensive, right? But
is oil mining more more capital intensive?
Very much.
How does it work?
I mean, you need an offshore rig. It can only take so many people. Those obviously change hands at times.
Yeah.
You don't live on there for a full year. You live on there for a couple of weeks, and the next crew comes on. Those tend to be international crews as well.
Okay.
Because they've got the skills. I mean, it's incredibly dangerous work. It's also very unpleasant.
Right. So now I have a very interesting question for you.
Yeah.
So you're from the Austrian school. Do you think it's necessary for Namibia then to have some type of protectionism for local employers and employees within this sector? That is to say, we're going to employ Namibians, not foreigners. We're going to...
Job reservation doesn't work.
Right, so so then I need you to give me a solution as to how we can make this pro-poor growth for Namibians, this discovery of oil.
So, I mean, with it, you get... If it is commercial, that
Yes.
means there's going to be a lot of money spent here, right? There's going to be upstream and downstream ramifications.
Capital expenditure.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of capital expenditure, but I mean, for your oil companies, for instance, they're going to bring in a lot of expats. So expats are going to need services. They're going to need houses or hotels, accommodation. They're going to be eating. They're going to be needing services, bank accounts,
It's like
restaurants.
a trickle effect, okay.
They're going to travel around, all that sort of stuff. A lot of that money gets spent here as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not directly employed there. I mean, if we've got the skills here, sure, use the skills.
Do we?
But that's the question: is do we? And no, I mean, we don't have an established oil industry, right?
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of discriminating against people on like the luck of the draw of where you're born, right?
Yeah.
It's not something you choose.
Me neither. I want a green card too.
If I knew it was that easy. There's a lot of upstream and downstream benefits, and I mean, government gets a lot of revenue from that, and that's where that money should be used to uplift, poor people's lives. So that's where government comes in and says, all right, well, we're getting a lot of this money, we're going to use that money for, making sure that, I mean, we spend a lot on education and healthcare, but the money isn't always the problem in Namibia, right? It's the quality of the spending as well. The accountability is a big challenge.
Okay.
So money can fix some of the problems, but it's not going to fix all of them either.
Yeah, that's not something I can deny. So do you think, let me just make it very simple and binary. Do you think poverty is Namibia's biggest problem, or do you think wealth inequality is Namibia's biggest problem?
I think both of those are a symptom of a bigger problem.
Which is
unemployment.
Oh, but isn't that what I asked? What did I ask?
Inequality and
poverty.
Poverty, yeah.
Oh,
and
right.
those are symptoms of unemployment. Right, and I mean, it's difficult. Namibia sits with we've got the population pyramid, right? If you look at age groups, so
we're younger.
The older people at the top, old people at the top, young people at the bottom. We've got a very big base, right? We've got a lot of young people. Our skills pyramid looks very similar, right? We've got a lot of we've got few highly skilled people. I mean, but that also tends to be fairly natural. It's just the size of it. The size of the base tends to differ a bit more. Is it very steep or is it very shallow? Yes. And ours is quite steep, right? We've got a lot of very low skilled people. You can see it in the labor statistics. I mean, they're 4 years old now, but you can see it historically that we've got a lot of people who, they've got maybe maybe matric now with this whole grade 11 nonsense that's been pulled. It's going to look worse, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Which, I mean, is frustrating because you're condemning people to you know, a very difficult life where they're going to struggle to find jobs. So you limit people. I mean, people are limited with their ability to find work. So now you've got a very large population, a very large labor force that is low skilled, for lack of a better word, and you've made it very difficult for people to start businesses and employ people. Then you've also made it difficult for people who have started businesses to find. I mean, we've got some skills here, but I mean, we don't have all of the skills. And you know, if you look in the newspapers, if you look at job adverts, it's for skilled people. It's not for middle or low skill. It's generally for high skilled people.
Yes.
And so we make it difficult for those positions to get filled, even if it is with a foreigner, right? And I mean, it's a very shallow way of looking at, oh no, they've taken a job. And you're sure they might have taken a job, but that person will need accommodation. That person will likely need to buy a car, you know, fill it with fuel, go to the shops, go to restaurants, go travel around the country, and they start spending money, and that money has a multiplier effect, which will also then create jobs.
Yes.
Right. So the biggest challenge is unemployment. We've made it difficult for people to work for themselves. We've made it difficult for people to start their businesses and hire other people. We've condemned a lot of people to I mean, a bad education system. You know, the CVs I get on my desk, you know, like as an analyst, you need to be able to read and write.
And use Excel.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you know, I wasn't great with Excel when I started working. I've improved since then. I'm still far from great. Ashamedly, I still use a mouse, but you know,
That's hilarious, man. Aren't you head of research? What are you doing?
I mean,
that's blasphemy.
Not all of the time, right? But I do use a mouse on occasion because sometimes it's just quicker.
So do you use one screen as well?
Oh no.
Okay, at least. Well, I forgive you. You're fine.
No, I can't. Even at home, I've got two screens. I can't use one. But the thing is, like, I mean, you know, those are the softer things that you can still work in. And I mean, that's something you can easily work on yourself, right? You can do courses, you can sit on YouTube and stuff and learn how to use Excel and how to improve on Excel and similar. But if you come out of school not being able to read and write and do basic maths, life is your options are very limited. And that's the big challenge we sit with. I mean, you know, to try and employ people who struggle to read and interpret and write properly makes it difficult because you know, I don't have the time between my job doing all my work and still needing to teach people things that they should have been taught in a school system.
That's what I was thinking. It should be. It's like it's a part of the whole university experience. Like you go there to learn how to read and write.
Before university. And now, you know, I mean, we spend a lot on education, but we've got kids who struggle with that.
So what I'm hearing is we are allocating to the right sectors. We are just executing poorly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you fix that?
Accountability is one.
Yeah, but that's quite loose though. Like, how easy is it to say that? Like, how are you literally going to keep people accountable for? Like, are you going to fire teachers if the students fail? Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, look, there needs to be a balance, but there needs to be accountability, right? So give parents a strong role in the schools as well, you know, because parents obviously want what's best for their kids. But, you know, for instance, if you've got a teacher who, you know, it's not to say that this is the norm, but you will have teachers, for instance, who are there to draw salary and, you know, don't really care if the kids are good at what they do.
So get it performance based. That's interesting.
But I mean, look, I think
we have a shortage of teachers.
Yeah, we've also got a bunch of ghost teachers, right?
Explain that. What is that?
Well, I mean, government's got a whole bunch of teachers that don't exist that they pay salaries to. So,
how do you know this?
It's. I mean, it's even in the papers. Government's well aware of it.
That's crazy. Wow.
But I mean,
I never knew that.
Yeah. So I mean, look, there's no accountability. But there's very little accountability.
Yeah. So governance leading into accountability.
You know, I mean, like. I mean, it's not that private sector is perfect, but in private sector there tends to be a closer tie between sort of for accountability, right? If you don't do what you're supposed to,
because you get paid for value. Makes sense.
Right. Whereas in the public sector that doesn't always tend to be the case, and I mean, go and deal with sort of any ministry, and you tend to see that quite quickly, right? I mean, you're not there to be helped. You're there as a burden on someone who's got a job. which is completely the wrong way.
That's hilarious.
It's funny, but it's true, right?
Yeah, that's why it's funny.
and that's not the way it should be.
Wow. Yeah.
So I mean, that's definitely something. I mean, government is a very big employer, and I think, you know, like, government sees its role as that in a country where there's high unemployment, that you know, they can't really fire people, and then I think it's a difficult line. But I mean, you know, you've got, you know, it's joked about regularly, but you know, if you're in public sector, you tend to have job security, right?
No, facts.
Private sector, it's not so much the case.
I would disagree though. I think even in Namibia, you have job security. You can't really fire anybody here.
Well, I mean, it's difficult to hire and fire people. It's not impossible, but it is difficult.
Yeah.
But I mean, in private sector, it's, I mean, you know, you're more likely to be fired than in the public sector.
Yeah, no, I get you.
And so, I mean, that's sort of also the accountability, right? Like, is there a consequence for your actions or lack of actions?
Yeah. No, that was very morbid though, I must say.
So it's sad, but it's true, right?
Right, cool. Let's make it a little bit more exciting. So you are an investor, right?
Broadly, yes.
Who do you invest with? Easy Equities?
Well, I mean, I dabble a bit on the JSE.
Okay, cool. So what I have
on
is
Easy
I have
Equities,
this little segment at the end of every podcast where I'm going to ask my guests to defend their portfolio. So give me
you're giving me an impossible task now.
Give me your... Let's make it 2, not 3. Give me your 2 biggest investment themes. You don't have to tell me exactly what it is, but if you want to, you can. It's not investment advice, guys, so calm down.
Yeah.
And then just
especially not from me. It's performing poorly, so it's not advice.
I mean, I think everybody's portfolio is performing poorly right now. So shoot.
I don't know. Like, I like to dabble in the small caps.
Oh, nice. I like small caps too.
Yeah. So I mean, I just find they're interesting and overlooked.
This is JSE small cap specifically, right?
And I enjoy the mining space, right? So I've got an interest in it. I would like to learn more about it, and so I tend to dabble around with those. So I mean, some of my holdings are very much geared towards the mining industry, especially some of the small caps, and it's not literally just mining, but it's upstream and downstream of mining as well. So I mean, yeah, for me, that the commodities thing has been a big theme, and I think it will still be, but obviously within that it varies, right?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting thing because I invest into small cap stocks as well, and I always justify it by, if you look at small cap stocks, especially in the South African perspective,
from the South African,
yes, so, but also nobody's covering them.
Yeah.
Like the brokers are not covering
no
them.
Research on
exactly.
it, yeah.
So that basically almost ensures that there will be a mispricing. If you do your valuation, you will find a mispricing.
Yeah,
so.
and I mean, and that's where you can find some hidden gems. So I mean, the sort of the 2 that have treated me very well over the last couple of years is sort of mining supplier, as well as a small cap logistics company, because you know, like logistics. I mean, logistics in an interesting way because it's not that they own physical logistics assets, right? They don't own trucks and ships and planes that do logistics. They are on the software side of it, so they've actually benefited quite largely from it. So you know, you don't, where you've got travel bans and lockdowns and stuff, you don't sit with assets that don't do anything.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And I mean, even just within that space, I'm thinking of some examples. If you just look at like normal or the bigger property companies in South Africa, they took a beating. But then in the small cap space, you see some of them doing a little bit better. And it's weird because the one that I was looking at, and I don't want to drop names because I don't want to give people advice. And I also don't want people to catch on now.
don't want to give away the gems you found.
Yeah, but there's a little gem, man. And it's cool that they're different because what happened was with all these supply shocks and shortages, right? People needed warehouses to store things across the globe, and this little gem actually owns warehouses across the globe. And I was like, damn! And I got it at such a good price, and I'm just waiting for it to just recalibrate and shoot out. So, I mean, that's a very good one. So I'll give you. I don't know what are we gonna do. We have to give the guests something if they have like a really good investment thesis, man. Like I like small caps. Yeah, like I like that. Bing, do something cool. Okay, that's one. I agree with that. Give me one that I can challenge. Do you buy crypto?
No, I don't understand it. I don't understand it well enough to look. I understand very little about the stuff I buy on the JSE, but I understand even less on crypto, so I don't feel comfortable.
That's interesting though, because you said you're an Austrian. You follow the Austrian School of Economics very closely. You like them. You like Friedrich Hayek. You like Milton Friedman. Friedrich Hayek actually came up with the idea of a decentralized coin, so privatizing money. And that's basically crypto, isn't it? A cryptocurrency. So
yeah, I don't understand enough of it to be comfortable and sure of it, right?
You don't understand what the pricing?
A lot. I mean, look. I mean, the markets in general, whether it's crypto or not, has been incredibly volatile and crazy, right? I mean, I saw this excellent tweet of I can't remember, someone. I think it was on gold or something, where someone was like, if you bought gold like 2 years ago, you'd be down this, or a year ago or whatever, you'd be down like this much. It was not so long ago, before gold sort of really rallied, and then someone was like, this is why you need to buy crypto and stuff, and someone else just retweeted and said crypto is down 43% over the same period. So
exactly, and then tomorrow it might not be. That's what's crazy, man.
So I think it's interesting and exciting, but I mean, like, there's a lot of dodgy stuff in between it that you need to filter through as well, right? There's a lot of these random coins that are just sort of a scam. I mean, there's been a couple. There's like a Bernie Madoff or something kind of coin, which like they created and they disappeared with the money. So I mean, if you bought into that, like to be honest, you got what you deserve. Yeah. But it's
I feel you, man.
It's not something I'm like that on top of, so I don't feel comfortable putting a lot of money. I'll put some money in at some stage once I find a nice and good way to do it, and once I've got money worthwhile putting into something. Yeah. But I don't understand it enough at this stage to be comfortable putting money in. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't do, right? People think they know or they don't know. They just hear things and they put money into stuff.
Yeah,
and that's
my mate made $100,000. Now everybody wants to make it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the story here, right? You hear the story of people making a lot of money. You don't hear the people losing all of their money.
It sounds like MySpace in 99 and 2000, to be honest. But I mean, just in terms of crypto, the only thing that keeps me away is there's no... Look, if you're going to look at it as an investment, right? Long-term investment, there needs to be an asset pricing model to determine the price. There's no such thing. You don't know what it's... Even if people say this is going to be the future of money, at what price? Yeah. Pricing is a mechanism, especially in a free market. So that's the only thing that's keeping me away. But I must say, I did invest into some crypto. I committed this sin. Hasn't been good to me, but, at least we're involved, Yeah, cool, man. That was amazing. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
No, man. Greet me properly. Move the mic. Yeah.